Okay, and we are live.
Yeah.
Yay.
I'm so excited.
So we'll just give it a couple minutes and see if anyone wants to jump on and join us from Facebook. And see if any of our other attendees are going to jump on. Oh, Claire's here too. Hi, Claire. And of course, everyone who registered for the webinar will get an email with the replay. And the replay will also be live up in the Big Creative Fun Facebook group forevermore for anyone who wants to come back to this. So let me just pull this up, check so I can see the screen for any comments. So if anybody has any questions or comments throughout, you can pop it in the chat box on Zoom, or you can also comment in the Facebook group. And I'll be keeping an eye on those if you have any questions at all for Lauren. Okay, so I think we can get started. So thank you so much for joining us, Lauren. I'm super excited to have you and to be having this very interesting conversation. That's really, really important. I think, we really need to be talking more about bodies, more about women's bodies, more about our connection to the world around us. So I'm really excited to be able to share your wisdom with everyone in the community. So do you want to give us an introduction into who you are and what it is that you do with your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me and everyone for being here. I'm really passionate about helping women wake up to the power they have within their own bodies and within just like these ancient lineages of power that we have, from our mothers and our grandmothers, that often has been sort of stifled by society and by the systems that we live in. And I know I'm not alone when I say, I just feel at a very young age, I knew I was meant for something really big, but society doesn't really make space for women to be big and be in their power and be, in their full creative flow. And so it just, over the last few years, it's become really clear to me that that's what I need to be doing, is helping women step up in these roles as leaders and healers and change makers, but doing it in a way that makes them feel really centered and really grounded and really powerful. So my title is a feminine empowerment coach. I call myself a catalyst for personal ritual. I believe ritual is a really crucial facet in every human experience. And so I really believe in helping women connect with the little rituals they have in their lives and making these mundane moments more magical. Specifically, in relation to what we're going to be talking about today, I work with the moon and feminine cycles. So the moon cycle that we're constantly rotating through on a collective level, but then also the menstrual cycle, which is one of our own microcycles that we get to experience on also kind of that monthly flow. There's a ton of other cycles around our lives. I also work with the annual cycle and sort of that wheel of the year, but really it's about helping women realize that it is in our nature to be cyclic. And sometimes that means having lots of ideas and feeling really excited and expanding and growing. And sometimes that means retracting and focusing on self-care and sinking into those, moments that do require ritual and ceremony as sort of rites of passage into these deeper and darker levels of ourselves, so that when we do move into that growth and that expansion phase again, we've kind of done that deep work and we're in a new place and ready to do deeper work with each and every cycle. So that's kind of like a scratching the surface. I'm very I would say definitely on the woo-woo side of things. I do a lot of work with the witch wound and sort of healing and waking the inner witch, which I know is kind of like fringe. It's definitely coming more into the mainstream, which makes me happy because I think we all have this empowered magical woman within us, and it makes me happy to see her coming out. So yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here and to be sharing with all of you today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think this is such an important conversation because, I mean, speaking from my perspective as an entrepreneur, as a creative woman, you know, when I started working for myself as a writer, like 3.5, 4 years ago, you know, and I was like running my own business, I a lot of the time was trying to fit myself into the box of like, you know, showing up, working like 9 to 5, having like a set amount of productivity that I was doing like every day, every week of the month. And like it was a real struggle for me. And like I wasn't successful at meeting those expectations that I guess, you know, society had kind of set, that we're used to, that when we're working in employment, that's what we're expected to be able to perform at. And I think, you know, obviously no one's really talking about this, about how like our bodies don't just perform for us like we want them to perform for us, and having that respect and having that relationship and listening and being responsive and really understanding that we need different things at different times. We're capable of different things at different times. So I think it's really, really valuable for especially for women to be having this conversation. And I know women's bodies are very different to men's bodies as well, which is another thing that's not really talked about. So it's really, really empowering to share this knowledge and have this understanding. And we have a lot of creatives, we've got a lot of artists and entrepreneurs in this community. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing this with us. And there's one question I also wanted to ask you, because you mentioned to me that you know, obviously menstrual cycles are connected to the moon cycle, but they're kind of a small part of it because, and obviously I just wanted to ask for you, because we do have some community members who are postmenopausal, that obviously like there are still cycles that are still affecting us in our later stages of life when we have stopped menstruating as well.
Yeah, this is a topic that comes up for me a lot. I have a lot of the women I'm working with, like I mentioned this to you, Sarah, are bleeding women who are still experiencing their menstrual cycles. But I do have a handful of women who have passed that phase in their life. And what I find in this like postmenopausal phase is a deeper access to really any phase of the cycle at almost any point. Like we have all of these years of experience of moving through the cycles, and you know, we can all relate to that like tired feeling while we're bleeding, and that like energy that we get afterwards, and the sort of, you know, like I always think of like myself as like glowing around ovulation. Like these are all like energies, right, that we're tapping into because like our body is responding to hormones. But you know, if I think a lot of artists and a lot of the spiritual entrepreneurs today can kind of relate to this idea of energy, and depending on where we're at in our menstrual cycle is going to align our bodies with a specific, I mean, energy is really just the best word that I have for it. But for postmenopausal women, they've been doing that cycle for so long, and they have, now that their bodies aren't kind of controlling that cycle, they can call in that energy whenever they need to. And the like lack of a physical cycle makes space for you to sort of create your own. And that's where like having a really deep practice with the moon becomes really powerful, because this is sort of like my catchphrase, but like the moon is my roadmap. And you know, the month for me, definitely, you know, the calendar month is on the 1st, but like the month, MOONTH is on the new moon. And I was actually born under the new moon. So like my whole life has started on this like lunar cycle, and understanding how that roadmap works, which we can totally dive into. And I would love to share a little bit on that. But understanding that cycle really, I think whether you're you know, a man or a woman, or you identify as other, or you're postmenopausal, or you haven't started your period yet, like wherever you are on the spectrum of human experience, you can relate to the energy that the moon is providing us. And I think that for those women who are postmenopausal, I have a lot of the women I work with, some of them say they like miss their menstrual cycle. They miss this like hormonal shift in their bodies and that physical feeling. But we can create that by connecting with the moon, by connecting with these other cycles, and really sinking into just the natural rhythms that exist all around us. Our body's natural rhythm is almost like just a reflection of what's going on in the world. I think of like this phase in my life between when I started my period and when I will eventually stop having a menstrual cycle as sort of like my big practice phase, right? That's like my big transformation phase where I'm learning how to navigate all of these cycles. And then once I have kind of passed into this phase where I don't need that guidance anymore, it's because I've absorbed all of the wisdom that I need from that cycle. And now I just have full access to it whenever I need it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. And I think for me, like I definitely went through a period of transition. And I actually think it was when I was living in Vancouver, Canada, where I was just surrounded by so much nature that I started to just naturally feel more connected to the world around me because it was right there on my doorstep. I was experiencing mountains, the ocean every day. And when you're out in nature, you really do notice the moon. And I think sometimes when we live in cities, we're so like holed up in little boxes. There's so much other light that maybe there's some skyscrapers around that are blocking our vision of the moon. So I think it can be very easy to feel disconnected from the world around us. So do you want to just go in to a little bit more detail in like how we can, you know, set that intention and create ritual around being more connected to the moon, and what are, you know, what are the different stages that we could be aware of that obviously help us with our productivity, with our creativity, and understanding where we're at?
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of like one of my like genius zones, is this like cycle and how to apply these little phases to each individual life, like to our individual lives, and how we can make the most of it. I do, before I dive into that, just want to touch on how like living in cities impacts our connection with the moon. And I was living in San Francisco when I kind of really first connected to lunar energy. And then it was all about the full moon. And then one summer, I moved into a van with my now fiance, and we were camping all year, all summer, and going to different festivals and living in nature. And that was when it really clicked for me. Like, whoa, it's not just about the full moon and the new moon. There's like all of these changes that go throughout this whole cycle. So it definitely, you know, I mean, obviously a lot of us live in cities, and that's sort of like a facet of the lives that we're living. But if you can, even just for like a couple of days, get out underneath that moon, it really helps connect you to her flow and her vibe and just everything that she brings up. And in the city, you can still it just takes a little bit more effort. You just have to set a little bit more intention to kind of take that time to find a place where you can peek between the skyscrapers and look for the moon. But yes, I would love to dive into the moon cycles, and I'll try to make this like sort of as quick as I can while not leaving anything out. I teach a whole 5-week course on aligning to this cycle, so I'll just try to keep it concise. But like I said, all of the cycles are going to start with the new moon. That's sort of like the spark. And the new moon is like the very, very tiniest sliver of light after she's gone dark. So a lot of people think of like the full moon, and then we see her waning, and she goes dark for a few nights. And the new moon is this very first spark after that dark phase. And for me, it's all about like setting intentions, getting really clear on what it is I want to achieve this cycle. You know, what is my focus? Recently, my focus has really been about like trust and just showing up super authentically and changing, you know, being open to shifting and changing myself when I need to. And when I set an intention on the new moon, it's less, you know, I think when I was younger, it was really easy to just like write it down on a piece of paper and be like, that's my intention. But it's, you know, as I've gotten older and as I've gotten more connected with this practice, I have found that it's something that I need to continue to bring throughout the whole cycle. So the new moon is kind of like my fresh starting point. And that's where I'm sort of like weaving the threads and that I'm going to bring with me throughout the rest of the cycle. So, you know, right now, this cycle, I am focusing on trust, and everything I'm working on is sort of bringing me back to this place of trust. And it just sort of sets the tone for the rest of the cycle. The new moon energy is like really potent for a couple of days. And then we kind of move into this waxing phase. That's going to be the phase where we're growing from new moon towards full moon. And I kind of think of it as like an upward swing on the clock. From like, if like 6 o'clock, it's kind of like everything's reversed with the moon. Like we generally like, you know, it's different from the Gregorian calendar and the 12-hour days that we're used to. But I often think of the new moon as being like at the bottom of this like dial, if we're looking at it, and the full moon being at the top. The waxing is this whole transition as we're moving towards that. And for me, the waxing moon is kind of really the juicy bit that we want to talk about today. This is like creativity, independence, productivity, the ability to go out and be social and do all the things. And it's really a powerful portal for getting stuff done and for focusing on that big picture. You know, like you can see the full moon is coming, so you've got to like get all this work done before that moment of fruition happens. I did see a question pop up, and I just want to make sure. Okay, cool. I see it's about crystals and stuff. So I'll definitely talk about all that goodness. So the waxing moon is the big transformation phase for me. And it really is about like showing up, doing the work. I talk a lot about moon and manifestation. And the waxing phase is like the phase that a lot of people forget that we have to do in order for manifestation to happen. Like we have to show up, we have to do the work, like we have to actually make it happen. And the waxing phase is all about that productivity, that like just getting down to it, but feeling really good about it, feeling this is what I'm supposed to be doing. The full moon is the peak. It's this point in which we have like the highest perspective, and we can really look down and or back or forward and see where we're going, where we've been, what's coming to fruition, what we still need to work on. It's a really unique perspective point for me. And there's a lot of celebration and happiness, I feel like, around the full moon when I'm in alignment. When I'm not in alignment, or when people around me are not in alignment, I notice a lot of tension. I notice, you know, the full moon gets a bad rap for like having a lot of crazy people and having people in the emergency room. And that comes from us being stifled and us not taking time to connect with that creativity and that productivity and living our dreams. And then the full moon kind of shines a light on everything that we haven't done, right? And so when we're actively pursuing our dreams, the full moon is a time of celebration. But when we're not, when we're feeling stifled, the full moon kind of shines a light on everything that we're not doing for ourselves. And so then once we've had this full opportunity at the full moon to just kind of take stock of everything, then we move into the waning phase. The waning phase is all about release and letting go and making space. You know, we're preparing again to come into that new moon so that we can start over. And that waning phase is all about letting go of everything that isn't serving you, that isn't helping you achieve those goals. You know, that intention that you set back at the new moon. By the time you're at the waning moon, you have an idea of like the work that still needs to be done in order for you to align with that new moon phase. And so the waning moon gives you that space. It's like the opposite of that transformation and that growth. It's the release and the surrender sort of to everything that you thought you needed, that life is actually like saying, hey, you don't really need that. And the waning moon gives you the space to let it go. And then sort of the last phase that I really work with closely, this is a very like simple breakdown. Some people will say there's like 9 phases in the moon. I'm just breaking it down to 5 for you guys today. But the last phase that I work with really closely is the dark moon phase. And this is like a day or two before the new moon, before we've seen that sliver of light. There's a phase where everything kind of just pauses for a moment. And I think that this really touches on our need to slow down and our need for pause between all of the work that we're doing. You know, I think a lot of the intense menstrual pain and the sort of problematic cycles that we have in our lives come from us not listening to that need to slow down. I mean, it's literally called a period. What do we put at the end of a sentence when we need to take a pause? A period. And so it's like it's telling us like, hey, I'm a period, you need to slow down. And most of us, like you totally mentioned at the beginning, like because of employment or because of, just the stress of living in a modern world and trying to keep up with that, it's really hard to remember to take that pause. But the dark moon is sort of this reminder like, hey, even the moon, who is known for shining her light, for being bright, for being this celestial being in the sky, even she turns away and takes space for herself. And so just to kind of like wrap up that little spiel that I just gave on the moon, we have this new moon where we can set an intention, plant a seed. The waxing phase is our opportunity to nurture that seed and grow and help it come to its fullest state. And then at the full moon, we just get to honor that full state, everything that has come to. And as we move past that full moon, we get to release in the waxing phase, let go of anything, trim off the branches of that tree that aren't serving that tree any longer. And then the dark moon, we rest, preparing for that next cycle, giving ourselves space to integrate and connect with anything that has come up. I also find that the dark moon phase is a really potent phase for intuition and like intuitive work. So if that's part of your work that you're doing in this world, that's a really potent time to just tap in and listen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Taking so many notes here. One question that came up for me was, oh yeah, that was it. So the full moon, because I obviously have picked up, as conversations around the moon and the different phases have, started to pick up, that the full moon is a time for release. I just wanted for you to clarify, is there a distinction between like the actual period where the moon is full, and then it sounds like you're saying the period of release is like after that period? Yeah.
A lot of people have different perspectives of the way they work with the moon. For me, like a lot of people say like the full moon energy lasts until the new moon. Like they'll say like whatever energies are coming up in the full moon will last until the new moon. And I think that that's true on the surface. But for me, the day before, the day of, and the day after the full moon is really like when I feel that like higher perspective. It's almost like I'm like sitting up on a hillside and I can like see my whole life kind of around me. And I feel like without taking that moment to, again, like, at the dark moon, we take pause, right? We take a moment to just integrate. At the top of the cycle, if we don't take a moment to give thanks and celebrate where we're at and take note of where we still need to work, I feel like we can rush into this releasing phase. So the new moon's about setting intention, the waxing moon's about growth. And if right after growth, we just go right into throwing things out the window, I feel like it's not giving enough reverence to the power of the full moon. The full moon is really about, for me, it's really about just sinking into that moment and allowing myself to just soak up everything that all the work I've done, all of the work I still have yet to do. It's kind of this, again, like the dark moon, a pause, but a more celebratory sort of, there's more action to it, I feel, whereas the dark moon is all about really slowing. And then, because of that unique perspective that you've had with the full moon, it makes it really easy to see what needs to be let go. So I think it definitely is preparing us for that big release. But for me, the waning moon is more about releasing. The full moon is more about taking a moment to really get clear perspective on everything that is coming to fruition.
I love this. And it's such a supportive way of just living intentionally, because if you think, and that actually really marries very well with business strategy, because, if you're making your strategy or whatever it is you're trying to achieve, whatever project, of just having a really clear goal for each month and knowing that this is the one thing that you're putting all of your focus and attention in achieving. And then, really giving yourself that time to see, what has to go, giving yourself that reflection time, giving yourself where you're like all in and taking action and making it happen. and really like living the full cycle of an idea, and really being intentional and really just understanding, the process of an idea coming to fruition each month. It's really cool. I love it. So do you have any tips that you can share for how you sort of apply this roadmap in business or in projects? That would be awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you brought that up. I mean, I feel like this is a lot, this is kind of a more businessy group. So I love that when it sort of comes to this conversation, because I've kind of found myself to be like, a lot of the women I'm working with are either already entrepreneurs and are like waking up to this like magical spiritual energy that they have, or they're like aware of this magical spiritual energy that they have, and they're realizing like, whoa, I can make a sustainable life out of this. And so I've kind of like by default end up giving most of my clients a lot of business advice. And it really all comes back to the moon. And like you said, starting each month with a powerful intention. I think with business, you're kind of, the financial calendar kind of rules you a little bit. But I like, the new moon doesn't often line up with the first of the month. And so that kind of gives you like two opportunities to like set goals or check in with your goals. The new moon for me is like that check-in point always. So for my business, I do run my business mostly from the new moon. My financial calendar is the 1st to the 30th, but pretty much everything else is running, like my client cycles and all those things are starting with the new moon mostly. And so getting really clear on what you want to focus on, like how much space are you making in your life for this work that you're doing? I have a little whiteboard that I keep in my office, and on the new moon, I either clean it all off and write everything else out so that it's fresh, or I'll clean off anything that no longer applies. If there's a large section that's still applicable to the work I'm doing, I'll keep that. I also like to reset my space during the new moon. So, like my desk is my altar. So I have like my singing bowls and my cards and my crystals and everything's here, and it can get kind of hectic, and I work really well in that sort of hectic space. But around the new moon, it's nice to just like reset and allow that space to be fresh again. The waxing moon is my favorite phase for as far as business goes. For me, it's when like everything flows. That's where we're at right now. We're coming up towards a full moon next week, on the next Friday, I want to say, a week from tomorrow. And it's, for me, waxing moon is all about like checklists and like checking off that checklist. They're my best friend during this phase of the cycle. It's really about like knowing what I want, this kind of goes into the more of the feminine archetype side of things, but the feminine archetype that's associated with the waxing moon and the phase that we're in right now is the maiden, or the like feminine warrior. And like this, I think of like Athena, like the goddess Athena, who is like this like powerful wisdom warrior. And she like knows what's best for herself. She's like going out, taking care of all of those things, checking off all of the things that she needs to take care of, helping the humans. Like she's all about getting stuff done, and from a very wise, centered, independent place. She doesn't have a husband telling her what to do. She's not concerned about having babies and having children and that sort of like mothering later in the cycle aspect. She's really focused on herself and her goals, and not in a selfish way, but in a centered way. And so for me, like my biggest advice for people during the waxing moon is like, create a checklist for yourself. If you don't like the way checklists make you feel, like don't think of it as like a daily list. It's just like, these are the things that I want to achieve during the next week. And just come back to that every day. Another thing that I love to do only during the waxing moon phase is time blocking. Really getting clear on like, this is what I'm doing during this time. This is what I'm doing during this time. My calendar is like really organized generally during the waxing moon. And then after the full moon during the waning phase, I'm like way more flowy and I don't schedule as much. I also love to plan talking, like speaking events and like any big launches if I can. Like if I'm going to be putting out a lot of energy, if I'm going to have to be showing up a lot, I definitely try to align that with the waxing moon and full moon phase if I can. Sometimes it doesn't work, and like you just got to go with it if that's what's being called to come through. But if I can, I'm really trying to align like all of my hard work with this phase. The full moon is, again, that point, you have that point in your cycle where you can kind of just reflect. I think the full moon, if you have the energy, sometimes the full moon can kind of take its toll on people, but if you have the energy, the full moon is a great time to just take a moment to celebrate all that you have done in your business. So maybe that means, you know, taking one of your coworkers or one of your employees or your partner out to work or out to lunch and, you know, have a glass of champagne or just celebrate. Sometimes it feels like frivolous to celebrate for no reason, but like, we're not talking about celebrating for no reason. You've done a lot of work, and every month we're doing a lot of work. And if we get into this habit of celebrating all of the work that we're doing, it becomes more exciting to do the work. It's like, oh yeah, on the full moon, I go to have that glass of champagne, or I go out to that nice lunch with my partner. We're going to have something to celebrate. And so creating value in that point of celebration and that point of honoring the work that you're doing is, I think, really important for business and for entrepreneurs, especially who are doing, you know, walking this road alone or, you know, without a huge team. It's like nice to have sort of that point to look forward to. And then waning, all the things that we need to release, those bad habits in our business. You know, if you are currently, if you're in a day job and you are ready to let go of that, I just gave notice at my day job and I'm going full time in my work. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's really exciting. And I had to wait until after had to wait until after the full moon because like that's the releasing phase. And I like wanted it to be very clear to the universe, like I'm letting go of this because I'm making space to receive, you know, the abundance from other places. And so if that sort of intention, like intentionally lining your business up with that sort of thing, you know, maybe you have to let an employee go, maybe you have to let a client go, you know, maybe there's these things that don't necessarily feel good to let go. And I find that aligning it with the waning phase, it like gives me a little bit more permission to know that like that's like we have to let go of things to make space. And it's kind of that like physical reminder. But also I think like for the other people, for the other side of things, you know, they're also, even if they're not aware of it, they're in a state of releasing. And so it's kind of like a kind thing. You know, when someone's in this state of expansion and I drop a bomb on them, like, oh, sorry, we're not going to be doing this growth thing anymore, I feel like it's a rougher, you know, let down. Whereas if I'm aligned with the cycle and I feel good about surrendering and releasing, and I know that just by the state of the moon, they're also in that state, it kind of gives me permission to feel okay to do those, to say those things and speak my truth. And I bet you know what I'm going to say about the dark moon. Take some pause, step away. You know, we were talking about connecting with nature and getting out of this like city mindset. Even if you live in the woods and you're an entrepreneur and you're working all the time, like you still need to close the computer and step away. And I think that the dark moon is a perfect time to do that. The cool thing about the dark moon is it really only lasts for like a day or two. And so you only need to take a little bit of time. These like small rests that we take, these intentional moments of pause are like amplify how much work we're then able to put back in. You know, I talk about with my clients, I talk a lot about like not being able to fill other people's cup until you've paused long enough to allow your own cup to be filled. And like I think about like if you have like the fountain and you're like filling up your cup and then like going and filling up everyone's cup, but if you only put your cup underneath that fountain for 1 second or not at all, you're never going to get refilled. But if you allow your cup to sit and be refilled for a moment, then you can go back out and serve the people that you're meant to serve. And I think that that point of pause is something that just gets swept over in most businesses. And it's a very It's a very masculine energy to just go forward. That's the other thing that I do a lot of work with, is like balancing masculine and feminine energies. We all have all of that. We all have that in our lives, both masculine and feminine. And the masculine is all about forward motion, and the feminine is all about cycles. And so together we do move forward, but we're moving in it's a little bit slower, and that's okay. So.
Okay, this is another question.
Yeah.
Because obviously this still applies to men too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because every man has masculine and feminine energy. And because I think a lot of men really suffer too from just like going full at it and like burning out. And obviously that's the way that a lot of our systems and structures are set up, is to just be like, go, 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 like hyper productivity all the time. But I would love to hear what are some of the like common challenges and struggles that a lot of the women face that you work with?
Yeah. Well, I would say for the big one is like not accepting our cyclic nature. That's kind of like a lot of the women who are attracted to me are attracted to me to work with me because they have a blockage about really going through this full cycle. Sometimes, like for example, right now I'm working with a woman who she just has this really negative attachment to the waning moon. She just feels like it's taking away from her. She feels like it's not providing space for her to release in a comfortable way. She feels like it's a tearing away from her. And so we will be doing work on like getting into that. What do you feel is being taken away, you know? And that can be done for each individual phase, right? Some people have really big troubles with the full moon, and that is generally because we're not expressing our truths. We're not stepping up and speaking the way that we're supposed to. And the full moon is shining a light on everything that we're not doing for ourselves, rather than shining a light on everything that we are doing for ourselves. When those things outweigh one another, the full moon is going to kind of highlight that. And so that's like the big one. The big one is like trying to align with this cycle and trying to connect with each phase so that you have each piece of the puzzle. The biggest one for me recently has been the witch wound, which is this idea that we don't show up in our marketing and with our clients and with in our lives, with our families and our friends in an authentic, creative, magical way. Like I definitely believe in real magic, but we can just talk about like, healing and creative and just these like really nurturing feminine gifts. We kind of don't show up that way because we have a fear of being persecuted. And that goes back to witch hunts and women and men also, but a lot of women being heavily oppressed and tortured and even killed for showing up and doing their magic work in this world. And so I think for those of us who maybe not even consciously identify with these archetypes of healer or artist or intuitive, we kind of, a lot of the women I work with are not even aware of the fact that this is what's playing out for them. And of course, the word witch was given to healers. It's kind of a derogatory term that has been reclaimed, I think, by women who feel empowered by it. And that's been a big theme, is like women who either in their businesses or in their family lives or just, in their day-to-day are feeling really blocked because they're scared that they're going to be persecuted for speaking their truth and for living in alignment with the moon and for, being artists and making a life as being a coach or a healer. That's kind of, there's a whole wave of specifically women right now who are being called to kind of create their own economies, create their own communities, and really tap into this like sisterhood and the power that brings us, and stepping back into that role. Like that's an ancient what's the word I'm looking for? Tradition, as like coming together in sisterhood and supporting one another and like trading our goods and trading our wisdom. Like that's been happening for thousands of years across humanity. It's a recent thing So it's a facet of capitalism and the patriarchy that we are not united in sisterhood and that we are in competition with one another. And really dissolving that is kind of a big theme of the work that I'm doing, dissolving competition. Like, we are not in competition with one another. Like, my medicine is unique to me, your medicine is unique to you. And like, we cannot be in competition because we are offering different medicine. And so it's really like just like dissolving these blockages around what it means to be feminine. And a lot of shadow work has been coming up right now. I think that this summer and the eclipses, it really like kind of creates space for us to shine light on our darkness. And it feels more safe to do it in summer, I think, than in winter, because the winter is already so dark. And especially in the Pacific Northwest where I'm at, it can be like very wet and cold. And, on the East Coast, I'm sure also like inside, and doing shadow work in the winter can be a dark journey. So the summer is giving us a really potent container for healing these deep, deep wounds that the feminine carries that are preventing us from showing up in the way that we are destined to show up.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's really cool, like the way we connected through a community. Like, there are these incredible communities of women, just like claiming all of the parts of themselves that either have been keeping secret or like undercovers or denying, or not even recognizing, because we've never been in a space where those parts of ourselves have been reflected back to us. Mm-hmm. And I know, like, personally for myself, though, I had a lot of shame around spirituality. Like, it was something that just kind of was calling to me, but especially coming from England, where people are, like very traditional and can tend to be a little bit closed-minded about woo-woo stuff. Mm-hmm. So I remember when I first started listening to meditations, I was like, like ashamed, and I would be like very secretive about it. And I would worry that someone would listen to me, would hear me like doing a guided meditation and think I was weird. So, that's definitely been the journey for me, until I got to a place where I've realized, like, no, like, this is genuinely a part of who I am. And there's a reason that I'm intuitively being drawn to all of these tools and all of this incredible magic that has like completely transformed my life and taken it to a whole other level. So I wonder if you have, and is there anything that you can offer for any other women out there who maybe feel shame about talking about these parts of their lives with their family, or stepping out and being really visible? Because I know that's a huge and a huge thing that holds a lot of women back in stepping into doing this work and really having success in a more sustainable and supportive way through using their natural gifts and talents, because of the fear of persecution. Is there anything that you can suggest to anyone who's going through that?
Yeah. First, I want to say that the burning days are over. That's kind of my first advice to my sisters and the women who are coming to me. And then my next bit of advice is like a little bit grim, but also I think really touches on this like witch wound, or this like spirituality wound, and this soul wound that we're all carrying, is this fear of stepping up to our life's purpose. And what I ask the women who are experiencing really heavy blockages around this is, if someone said to you, this is your life purpose, this is the impact that you get to make, and they showed you a list of all of the names of every person that either through direct or indirect magic you would make an impact on their lives, and you would make their lives better, and that list wrapped around the earth, if you could see that list of impact that you were going to make, and then someone said, but you're going to be persecuted for doing this work, you're not going to be able to live the life that long dream life that you lived of. Your life's not going to be like that if you do this work, but this is your purpose, and this is the possibility of the impact that you can make. Most of the women I'm working with are like, yeah, I would still make that impact. I would still show up. I would still do that work. And like, if we're put on this planet for a reason, we're all going to die. We're all going to pass on at some point from this life. And if we're put on this planet for a reason, then like, that's what we should be doing. And it's scary to show up that authentically. It's scary to say like, yeah, I will burn at the stake for this purpose that I have and this message and this mission. That's terrifying. But that's the step we have to take to like really do the work that we're here to do. You know, I'm not saying that we're going to burn at the stake. Like I said, those days are over, but knowing in your heart that it's worth it to help the people who are ready to be healed by your work. And, you know, I'm a healer, I'm a coach, so it's easy for me to talk about big healing, but as a business, you know, if you're a business coach or you work in business in any form and you're helping other people step up in their businesses, you're helping other people achieve their dreams, you're providing services for people, like this is your medicine. I think that kind of that term of like personal medicine gets like wrapped up in like, if you're a Reiki practitioner or you're a massage therapist, but it's like whatever gifts we're bringing are worthy and valuable. And I think that once you're clear on your mission, once you're clear on your purpose, and you've connected with that power, that's the other thing about that persecution, is there's a reason why those people were there's a reason why that persecution happened. There was extreme power and someone was scared of that power. And so those people were silenced for having extreme power. So now when we're experiencing these memories and these connections and this fear of stepping up, we can connect back to the power that was originally the reason for the oppression. And then we can turn that on its head and say, like, we're not going to be oppressed this time. We're going to come together. And that's kind of what we're doing here in this conversation, in my Facebook group. Like, all of the work we're doing is coming together and supporting one another and saying, like, you're trying to get us to compete, you're trying to get us to be scared, you're trying to get us to not show up and speak our truth and share our magic, but we're going to do it anyway. And you know, it's not that simple. You know, I have a 13-week program where I work through and spend a lot of time healing, you know, diving into this. But the awareness of the connection and between, you know, this fear that we have and this sort of like old paradigm that doesn't really exist anymore. Once we make that connection, it's really easy to like take that first step. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, such a powerful and really important message. And I just want to invite, if anybody has any questions for Lauren, please pop them in the chat box or leave them as a comment on the Facebook page. And I also noticed Megan left the comment that she says that like dudes totally follow our lead. So when she makes time for rest, you know, so do they. And I think that just represents that, you know, of this conversation of like women really stepping into leadership and really stepping into power and harnessing our ability to make magic, to create something from nothing and to create transformation, to create healing. And that is really, really powerful. And that maybe we've been uncomfortable, you know, with that idea of being powerful and being a leader, because maybe in our families, you know, the men had the power and the control. In our workplaces, we were always under the power of, you know, men in senior positions, which, you know, is very often the story. So there's a lot of shifting in just in our own perception of ourselves as powerful, as women, as leaders. And really just reimagining that in our own psyche and being able to step into that and accept our role as somebody that has power and as a woman that has power, like in our families, in our communities, in our ability to influence for the better, and really being comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yes. And I feel like a lot. So just like we talk about the wounded feminine, there is a wounded masculine. And this wounded masculine is doing everything it can to be what it thinks it needs to be in order to like impress this wounded feminine. And it's like, we're wounded. Like, let's stop trying to impress each other with our big ass wounds. Like, let's heal and hold space for one another in that healing. And I love that she brought that up, that the men kind of will follow us. And it's the truth. The very first creative energy in the universe was like the very first split was like this feminine and masculine split. But the feminine gives birth to the masculine. Like it was from within the feminine that the masculine came. And that's a controversial statement right there. But, you know, what on this planet, other than like maybe like seahorses, does the masculine give birth? It's the feminine who gives birth. And so the masculine naturally follows the feminine. It naturally comes from that. So if we can give the masculine permission to sink into this role, and I'm not just talking about men and women, I'm talking about like these energies. If we can give permission within ourselves and to our partners and to our friends, if we can give them permission to embody both this sacred and healed masculine and this sacred and healed feminine, then we really are like creating deep space for that healing. And we really are allowing ourselves to be in our fullest. I also did want to touch on the question that Dory asked about crystals for productivity, and keeping them out in the moon and when in the new moon and that sort of thing. I love crystals. They're probably my like primary metaphysical tool that I use, other than oracle and tarot cards. But I would say crystals are primary for sure for me. Really, when it comes to productivity and creativity, it's really what calls to you and what gets you going. I think that quartz, clear quartz, like here's just a little like clear quartz point here. I love to like keep these out on the my balcony on the waxing moon, that sort of like expansion phase. Clear quartz is really easily programmed. So like I can like set them out on my table, out on my balcony, and just like set the intention that the waxing energy and this expansion and growth energy from the moon is infused into these stones. And the next day I can bring them in the house, or if I leave them out for a couple days, I can bring them in, and then I have that little stone and I can call in that energy whenever I need. Quartz is a really excellent generator and program stone. So like clear quartz is a great thing for pretty much anything. As far as just like productivity and creativity, any heart stones, any stones that activate your heart are going to allow you to be productive and creative from a very centered space. My new favorite is kunzite. So you can see it's like, it looks clear, but if you look at it on like the long angle, it gets more pink. I don't know if you can really see here, but in the sunlight, you can see it turns really pink, and it's like rose quartz on like supercharged. So it's really good for like getting me centered in my heart and helping me just feel really connected when I am in that creative mode. And then as far as the moon and crystals, full moon for like charging up that energy, right? If you just want to like, you want your like altar to be supercharged, like put all your stones out for the full moon and let the moon kind of rain down on them. I also love to put water out in jugs and let the water get charged by the moon as well. And I'll just drink that or use it in ritual or make cacao or tea with it. It's just really supercharged energy water. And then the new moon for me is really about clearing. Like if I've been doing a lot of deep work with a crystal, like this kunzite wand, I've been doing a lot of stuff with. On the new moon, I set it out and I let it, the new moon sort of reset the energy, right? The dark moon is about, the waning moon and dark moon are about releasing. So if you feel like a stone is like really has some crazy energy to it and you want to allow for that clearing, waning dark moon, keep it out there all the way through the new moon. But if you're just want to just do a quick reset, the new moon is a great time for your crystals to be outside.
Awesome. And Dory also asked, she recently purchased a rutilated quartz. Does that enhance the quartz in some way?
Yes, rutilated quartz is really powerful. Is it like a gold or copper? It's basically, so think of like metal. Rutile is generally metal. Sometimes it'll be tourmaline or another stone, but it's generally like copper or gold or silver. And it'll be these like hairs, these like strands in it. And quartz is already a great generator. It already vibrates at a very consistent frequency. And with the metal in there, think metal is a great conductor. And so it's gonna just kind of intensify that that ability to pick up vibrations and that ability to continuously generate that. There's also a lot of other things that rutilated quartz has properties. There's a lot of other properties you could totally Google and find a lot of information on it.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Lauren. This has been such an amazing, super important conversation. So I would love for you to share how people can continue to follow your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can connect with me on my website, which is wombtreealchemy.com. And I'll share that in the Facebook group and on the event page. I'm also on Instagram at wombtree.alchemy. I have a Facebook group that is like almost 600 women right now. And that's the Womb Tree Alchemy Sisterhood. So if you are like really connecting with this idea of, you know, having a strong community of women to sort of explore the depths of this like feminine journey, that's a really great place to have sisterhood and connect with other women. And then, so that's kind of like the basis, like the basic places to connect with me. You can always reach out to me on Facebook. I'm very active on there. And yeah, and then I have some offerings that I would love to share with you guys if that's something that we're cool with.
Yeah, tell us what you got.
So I was talking about the witch wound, and right now I have 3 spaces available for an intensive session to work through that, available in August. So if you're interested in diving really deep into that aspect of your healing journey, that would be a really wonderful opportunity to dive really deep in just like a quick session. It's a 3-hour session, but rather than like doing like a 5-week or 3-month program, it's a really great way to just dive right in and kind of really do some deep healing in one session. And then, so if you're like, know that you're feeling called and you are like ready to do the healing work, that would be a great opportunity to jump in and get that started in the next couple weeks. And then starting on Saturday, I'm actually doing a free 7-day immersion in my Facebook group on healing the witch wound. And so I'm basically creating this narrative that I will share on live, and it's going to be probably pretty dark and triggering on the first half, but that's kind of what the healing journey is about. The second half is really about, you know, applying these tools and learning how to integrate these awarenesses that we come through. It's kind of like a little bit of a healing challenge. Any woman who participates fully in the 7 days and like shares her reflections in the group is going to get a 45-minute session with me to help integrate. So that's an awesome opportunity to just get a free session to talk about, you know, how this fear of showing up as ourselves is getting in the way of our work. And I will share the link to that. I have like a little email list going. That way we can all kind of be in connection. And so I'll share that as well on the event page. And there's just a lot of things coming up. Like I said, I am just leaving my day job. I have 4 shifts left there. And so there was definitely going to be a lot of new things coming out in the next couple months. So I would say just stay tuned. And I'm really, really grateful to have had this conversation. It's phenomenal to be able to speak on these topics that are so near and dear to me and to be received so warmly and welcomely. So I really appreciate that, Sarah, and to everyone in this community. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to connecting with you more.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're all so grateful to have you here and to be having this conversation. And, you know, I think we should all do that witch wound because, you know, it's challenging and it is dark having to heal ourselves, but like we're women and we're freaking strong and we can do it. Yeah. And the other side is way more fun. We've gone in and done that work. So yeah, amazing. I wish you all the success in your business. Congratulations on making the transition to full time. And clearly it's going to be a huge success because it's really what's needed at the moment. So yeah, definitely keep in touch. Let us know how you're getting on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah. This was an absolute pleasure. And I would love to continue to contribute to your community as much as I can. This is wonderful, and I'm really grateful for having this space.
Yeah, please. We're so happy to have you here. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And please make sure you continue to follow Lauren's work. And yeah, we'll post all of the links and everything for you to get in touch with her below the replay in the Facebook group. So have an amazing day, everyone. And I'll see you very soon. Lots of love. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.